Hi, and welcome to the Dust session for builders around spaces, data use cases, and meeting transcripts. We'll just wait for another minute or two to have a little bit more people joining. But basically, the agenda for today is to explore this, and then we'll have a little surprise at the end around something that we'll be releasing pretty soon, and that might change a lot how you guys use Dust in the future. All right, I'll just pause myself for another minute, and we'll start soon. Okay, let's start. First thing is I see a lot of people are saying hi in the chat. Don't hesitate to ask questions in the chat. We've got Remy and Pauline who are going to be answering any of the questions. And if they can't, I'll be answering as well. Sorry about my voice and my cough. I'm a bit sick, so I might have to stop to cough sometimes. All right, what's the agenda for today? We'll be talking about spaces. What we call spaces in Dust is how to manage your data, like how to segregate data to the right people and the right places. We'll talk about some data use cases and how to use the Snowflake integration on the table queries tool, which is basically how to ask questions like natural questions to your data. We'll be talking about meeting transcripts in Dust, which is basically how to process your meetings, understand the key points, actions, and stuff like that, and run assistants to actually extract the right information or actually store the meeting transcripts on Dust and be able to talk to them later. And the little surprise that we hadn't mentioned yet is that we're building a Chrome extension, and so we'll be exploring that today as well. The last thing we want to talk about is that we have a Slack community, and you can ask anything in the Slack community as well. All right, so basically the audience here should be builders, so you might know what Dust is about, but I have a few slides just to explain again what we're doing. So we're helping build specialized assistants in a no-code fashion. So assistants are a set of instructions that are attached to company knowledge. So basically, you'll be connecting your company data and you'll be using Dust tools to be able to query that data. And the last thing is that you can also embed those assistants pretty much everywhere. And so we have the Chrome extensions coming up, but we also have a Google Sheet plugin, we have a Zendesk integration, and we have a pretty strong API. So you can build on the API and really embed your assistants pretty much anywhere. So what that raises is that you need your data to stay safe, right? You need to be able to segregate what data you put where. You might not want your entire workspace, your entire team to be able to access the data that you plugged into Dust. And so that's why we created the concept of spaces. Spaces is basically the way to manage data in Dust. So let me share my screen. There we go. We have, is my screen sharing? No. There we go. We have, whenever you start plugging some data into Dust, there's two steps that you need to do. The first thing is that you need to connect your data to Dust as a whole. So this is done when you're an admin. If you're an admin, you have a connection admin panel here. Sorry, yes. And so this is where you're going to be plugging your data to Dust. So that's the connection admin part, does not segregate the data and does not expose the data to anyone. So whenever you're creating a new connection here, you need to add as much data as you can, because that's basically the base of your pyramid. So in the connection admin, you have an add connection button here, and you're going to be able to add any of the connections that we already have. So you can add your Snowflake connection, you can add your GitHub connection, Slack, etc. Here in this workspace, I already added Google Drive, Intercom, and Zendesk. And so if I enter my Google Drive, well, it's a demo account, so we don't have a lot of things in it, but basically I can go through my entire Google Drive here. But this does not mean that any assistant will be able to use the Google Drive data, because it's not in a space yet. Spaces are what you see under the connection admin tab. And so the connection admin tab is only visible to admins. If you're a builder, you won't see that tab. You will only see the spaces that you have access to. And so the spaces look a little bit similar. If you open that and you open that, the connection admin is basically the data you connect to Dust, and the spaces under it is basically the data that you will pick from the connected sources and that you will add into spaces. You've got two different types of spaces that are possible: the open and restricted spaces. The names pretty much speak for themselves. Open spaces are available to everyone in your workspace by default. So anything you put in there will be available to all your users. All the assistants they could build can use that data. So make sure that all the data you add to your open spaces is data that you want to share with everybody. By default, in Dust, you have a company data space, and you can add a new one if you want. So you just click that new button, new open space. And the main thing here is that if you want to create a space, you need to choose if it's going to be restricted or not. So here I'm creating an open space, so I'm not restricting it. And now I've got my new open space connecting here. If I go to connected data, I see that I have nothing in it because it's a new space and I didn't add any data. So if I want to add a data to that space, I'm going to click add data, and that's the data coming from my connection admin tab that's available to use. So if I want to use anything from there, I can say, okay, I just want to use the Dust tickets and the employees role sheet, and that's it. My workspace, my workspace has access, my new open space has access to the data. And because it's an open space, all the users of my workspace have access to that data. If I want to create a restricted space, it's pretty much the same thing. I'm going to say, okay, new space name, restricted space from the webinar. I'm going to tick that restricted access box, and I'm going to be able to add some members. So in that workspace, I don't have a lot of members, so I'm going to add those 3 members and create a space. And here what's happening is that I've got my restricted space, I've got members attached to it, and so only the members that I just added can see that space and can create assistants or use any assistant in that space. Whenever you're going to create an assistant, the first thing that you are going to be asked, so I'm going to create an assistant. As I said, an assistant is a set of instructions. So some instructions here, your prompt basically. And the next thing is that you need to add some tools. What we call by tool is basically being able to search through your data in some way. So let's say I want to do a semantic search. I'm going to use the search tool, and I'm going to have to select a data source. And that's where the spaces start playing. When I'm going to select a data source, I'm going to have to select a space. I don't see my last restricted space that I just created because I didn't add any data to it. So there's no data to be added. So there's no data to be searched from. So I'm not going to be able to see it. If I want to see it, I have to cancel all that, add some data to my new restricted space, and then I'm going to be able to see it. So here I'm just going to use the new open space because I added some Google Drive and some Zendesk data. So I'm going to be able to add the Google Drive on the employee's role. Some I have to describe my data. So some then send us data, and some Google Drive data. And there we go. Now I can see that I've got this little warning here popping up. Based on the sources you selected, this assistant can only be used by users with access to the space new open space. Whenever you start adding data from a space to an assistant, the assistant becomes restricted by default. Well, restricted. If it's an open space, it's not going to be restricted. But if it's a restricted space, then only the users of that space will be able to see and use that assistant. So that can make some assistants disappear to people. If you have an assistant that doesn't use data and suddenly you plug into some data that's in a restricted space, it can disappear from the view of some people. So make sure you're aware of it. But yeah, that's basically how you manage data, how you segregate your data into Dust, and how you make sure everything stays secure and you're not sharing too much data to everybody. I don't see any questions in the chat, so let's keep going. All right, the next thing we want to talk about today is data analytics in Dust. So basically, in Dust, you have a lot of different tools that are usable. I talked about the search tool already, which is semantic search, but there's a lot of things. We call that, well, you can figure it out as Lego bricks. Basically, you're going to build your assistant and you're going to pick the right brick depending on the right use case. So you can do semantic search, you can do code interpretation, data extraction, web search, etc., etc. But the one we're going to be talking about today is the one in bold here, called table queries. Basically, it's a way to transform a user's question, like a regular good old text question, into a data scientist question, which basically is a SQL query that you're going to be running on a database and extracting data to have actual knowledge out of it. So for that, well, I've got a video ready in case something goes wrong, but we'll try to do it live. Okay, let me just share my screen again. There we go. So we've got at Dust, we've got an assistant that we call Analyst. An Analyst, I'm going to show you how it's built. Analyst is built with a pretty strong set of instructions about how is really good at doing queries directly into Snowflake. But the important part here is that it's able to query tables directly in our Snowflake database warehouse. And so this is where it gets really interesting, because we export all of our Dust usage, all the workspaces usage in Snowflake. And so I'm going to ask Analyst to visualize the average number of messages sent per workspace. And I'm going to start and keep talking because it can take a little bit of time, of course. Count of messages sent per day, average across 7 days periods for the last year, 1 data point per week, one label on the x-axis per month. Should be an area chart, 1 line per workspace for the top 10 workspace, and the other line is the rest. And the tooltip should show the week and the absolute value. So what's happening here is that you can see the assistant is querying tables. So right now, what it's doing is that it's retrieving our Snowflake data schema. It's understanding how the schema is, well, how it's made, so how the data looks like. It's comparing that to the question that I asked, and it's going to retrieve all the data, get the data points, and build a graph. And this is the graph. And so before, to be able to get a graph like that, you would need to be able to create a SQL query yourself. You'd need to be able to, well, you'd need to be a data scientist, actually, because I'm going to show you the SQL query, and it's not a small one. So here, if I open the tools inspection, I'm going to have the full reasoning of what the LLM did. So you can say that everything that was needed to be done, which is calculate the number of daily messages per workspace, do 7-day rolling averages, identify the top 10 workspaces, etc., etc. A ton of stuff to do, and that's the query that was built. So that's the query that extracts the data that's necessary to build that graph. And the data that's necessary is here. Well, actually, I'm just sharing a Chrome tab, so it's not opening. But basically, it's opening a CSV with a bunch of data points. The cool thing is that it was pretty fast. We used to have to rush all the data points directly in the prompt, but now if I open the code of that graph, basically you can see here that it's, well, where is it? Yeah, it's actually using a file. So what we're doing behind the under the hood, sorry. What we're doing under the hood is that we're querying all that, making a CSV, uploading the CSV into GCS, a storage, and then the actual component that we're building on top of that in the discussion is able to use that file directly to display your data. And your data is actually dynamic, right? I have tooltips and stuff like that. And I can ask, because I'm in a discussion, in the same discussion, the LLM keeps having the context, right? So I can say, do the same with active users. So the first graph is about number of messages per workspace. And the second graph is going to be about the number of active users on the platform. So right now, again, it's querying tables. It's going to take a few seconds, of course, because it's querying, it's building the data, building the query, querying Snowflake, getting back the query, building the CSV, uploading the CSV, building the component. But you can see that it's just taking maybe a minute and a half, and the component is generating. So we'll just wait for it to be done. There we go. Now I've got my active users. So the active users could be defined in many ways. That's Alicia. That's just to tell you that we have that in our instructions. Basically, we define what an active user is. For us, an active user is a person that sent a message in the last month. And so the assistant is aware of it and is able to generate the right query depending on that. So basically, it really depends on the instructions that you will give as well. That's why our instructions are a bit long and not just you're a SQL god. And if I want to keep doing that and keep doing, combine those two, keep doing something a little bit more complicated, combine those two graphs and add a way to switch between the two buttons. So right now I'm still asking the analyst to do something about graphs, but you see that it's deciding not to query anything because our Snowflake integration is smart enough to understand when there's no need to go hit the database. Right now, it already has all the data needed to combine the two graphs, right? It doesn't need to go query anything again. So it's directly building the new component. And now I have my two graphs, and I can switch. Well, actually, I've got the buttons showing up at the top, but I can switch between my two graphs. And so if I want to export the code, I just show the code, export that, and I'm going to be able to display those graphs directly somewhere I need. All right, so that was basically it for the Snowflake integration. So that allows you to query your data warehouses. So a lot of data points, you can start building graphs on top of actual big data, because Snowflake is making the heavy lifting. The other thing that we have at Dust, which is really interesting, is that you can do this type of SQL queries on files. So let's switch. Sorry. You can start doing these queries on files and on files coming from different worlds, which means that you can query an Excel spreadsheet and in regard to a Notion database, in regard to a CSV that you have in your computer. What I mean by that is that you're going to be able to create assistants. Let me share my screen again. You're going to be able to create assistants that have access to, where is it? There we go. I created an assistant called RoleViz. I got very lazy on the instructions because I just copy pasted the analyst instructions. So it's talking about Snowflake and stuff like that, but it's not connected to Snowflake this time. And I added a query tables tool, but this time it's not connected to Snowflake. It's connected to Google Drive and it's connected to a CSV that I uploaded. My Google Drive file has, well, it's called employees roles. So it's basically maintained by HR. And it's just a list of the employees at Dust with their role. That's it, nothing else. The CSV that I uploaded is the user's activity in October on Dust, on our workspace. So different things. The only thing that joins the two CSVs, well, the two databases, are the actual employees, right? Because in one of the tables we have their roles, in one of the tables we have their activity. So the activity is basically one line per message per person, per message that they sent on Dust in October. Okay, so what can I ask to something like that? Well, basically, I could say, okay, roles.viz, show me the roles of the most active users. So what that is going to be doing is that it's going to take both databases, again, coming from different parts of the internet. One of them is coming from my computer, is a CSV that I uploaded. The other one is coming from Google Drive, and it's being updated pretty much daily by our HR team. And I'm going to query those tables as if, well, I don't know what it's doing, a viz. Don't graph it. Oh, okay. It tried to create a graph, but it's actually answered as a table in there. And basically what it's doing is that it's able to do, well, I don't know how you call it in English, but in French it would be called a tableau croisé dynamique between the two files, and joining that data to be able to answer. So now I've got my user, I've got their role, I've got the number of messages, and I've got the number of active days that they spent in October. Pivot table. Thank you, Alexandre. So yeah, basically we're doing a pivot table on different files coming from again, they shouldn't be able to talk to each other. But on Dust, whenever you put them in the assistant and you use the table query tool, they're all converted into one single database. There's a SQL database that's being spun up whenever you ask a question to your assistant, and there's an actual SQL query being run. And so if we open the tools inspection here, we can see pretty much the same thing that we saw with Snowflake. Well, the question is a lot simpler, but you can see that user activity is being queried. So we're doing a sum of total messages to get the number of message counts, and we're getting the active days count, et cetera, et cetera. And then we're joining, we're making a left join on the employee's role on the user email. So the join, the pivot between the two files is the user email. And that was detected by the assistant. We don't have to tell anything. It just got it. Because whenever you upload a table file on Dust, we actually enrich it to be able to understand it, to make sure the LLM has all the tools it needs to be able to work with that file. What are the prerequisites to enable this access to the schema of the structured data source? Well, basically the schema is the headers of your CSV or of your Excel spreadsheet, etc. There's a lot of stuff happening whenever you upload a table to Dust. We enrich those headers. We try to make something more intelligible to the LLM, and then we're gonna inspect the columns to find for like similarities. For example, if you've got enums in your columns, like if you've got a column with like 5 different choices, then that's something we're going to expose to the LLM to make sure that it's not going to try to give a different choice than the ones that you have available. I see there's a few questions, so I'm going to take time to answer them. Is it only available on the Dust interface, or can I plug it in the Slack or MS Team environment? You can plug it in the Slack environment. We don't have an MS Team bot for now, but you can definitely talk to your Dust assistants inside of Slack. All right, yeah, that's pretty much it for the data viz points. All right, let's move to meeting transcripts. So meeting transcripts are pretty much a hidden thing in Dust for now. So it's available in our documentation. So if you've been able, like if you've looked at our documentation, you've been able to ask us for to activate meeting transcripts. But it's not something that's available by default. But basically, what we offer is that you can ask an assistant to process your meetings after your meeting is done. And so you can analyze meetings, you can summarize meetings. There's a lot of stuff you can do. And you can now, since a few days ago, you can now store your meetings on Dust to be able to talk to them later, to do some qualitative analysis and stuff like that in the future. So let me show you how it works. I'm just going to open a little poll first. If you guys can, well, I don't see the poll showing. Okay, you guys are voting, so I guess I guess it's showing. But basically, yeah, we're trying to figure out if there is some more transcripts meeting tools that we should add to our artillery or not. But okay, the while the poll is going through, I'm just going to show you how things work. Basically, if you have the meetings transcript activated on your workspace, you can click on your little picture on the bottom left and then hit meeting transcripts. And you're going to see something like that. For now, we just have 2 transcripts providers. So depending if you're using Google Meet or Gong, you choose your transcript provider, and that's why we have that little poll. I see that a lot of people are not using transcripts or are using something else than the list that we added. But basically, let's say I've got Gong connected. Now I've got 2 different things that I can do. I can ask to store all my transcripts. So if I want to store the transcripts that are retrieved by Gong after a meeting, I can say, okay, I'm going to go in the Alban space and store that in the meeting folder. And the other thing I can do is that I can say, I want the well, we've got a few assistants around transcripts. We've got transcript highlights, transcript summarizer, etc. So I want the transcript summarizer assistant to be able to run on my transcripts after my meetings. And sorry. And I'll be receiving an email with the transcription, processed transcription. So that's fairly easy. It's just a couple of clicks. And whenever you activate that, if you have Google, let's say I use the Google Meet transcript instead of connecting Gong. Basically, if you have a Google Meet meeting and you transcribed it, automatically after 15 minutes, you should receive your Meet transcription directly by email. And in your space here, if I go in my knowledge tab and in my meetings, you'll see that I've got a bunch of meetings that show up here. And I can build an assistant that can query any of the data in those meetings. Sorry about the cough again, pretty sick, but I'm pulling through. All right, I won't spend too much time on the meeting transcripts, I guess, because I see that only, let's say, 30% of the people, or well, 40 maybe, using meeting transcripts. I see 8% of the people are using Mojo. That's the next one that we're looking at to integrate. So that's a good thing. Cool. All right, let's move. I'll open the chat again just to see if there are any questions. If you have any other meeting transcripts that you want to add to Dust, you can do it through the API. It's just, those guys are the native integrations that we built, but we are open. Like the API is open, so you can do either through Zapier or directly through the API. Just upload your transcript. All right, next thing we want to talk about today, and last thing we want to talk about today, is the Chrome extension. All right, I'm going to have to share my screen differently to be able to show the extension. There we go. This is my Google Calendar. How do I? Okay, that's my Google Calendar. And let's say there's a lot. Well, I'm not completely full, but let's say I want to ask something to Dust about my Google Calendar. We don't have a Google Calendar integration, but you can see here that I opened a little Dust extension just by clicking on the Dust extension here, and something pops up on the side, and it looks a lot like Dust. That's because it's Dust. And so I can do pretty much exactly the same thing that I can do in the web UI. And so if I just ask, okay, what's my last meeting of the day? It's basically going to tell me that it doesn't know because it's not connected to Google Drive, to my Google Calendar. It doesn't have access to my Google Calendar, etc. But the cool thing here is that I'm in the extension. So I can ask to attach the tab content to the extension. I just click that button here. And I'm going to ask the exact same thing. But now the extension, and so the LLM has my tab content. And now it can answer that my last meeting is a webinar, the session for builders from 5 to 6. That makes things really, really powerful because you can start having Dust. So here I'm talking directly to Claude, so Claude isn't plugged to any of my data. But now you can actually ask your assistants that are plugged to your data to have the context of the tab you're in. So you could be on, I don't know, you could be editing a Google document, or you could be on Notion, you could be on a website, and just ask, okay, is our website up to date? Well, let's actually try. Let's try. Well, actually, I can't be on the Dust website. I don't know. Let's say Dust AI. I'm going to try to find. Okay, pricing. I'm going to ask Dust, is our pricing up to date? And see what it does. So now it's thinking and it's searching for internal sources because I'm actually calling Dust itself. And now it's pulling from some enterprise pricing that we've had. So it's actually telling me, yeah, our pricing is up to date. That's nice. If I want to go on the security, I can say, okay, what's our current SOC 2 status. And here, again, I didn't tick the tab box. So maybe I should do that, actually. I'm going to add the tab content is our SOC 2 status up to date. And the cool thing with the extension is that you can also add screenshots. So if you have, I don't know if you guys saw that, but I made a video a few months ago about being able to check if your website had the right brand guidelines compared to your marketing guidelines. And so that's something you can definitely do now directly using the extension. So basically, yeah, the Dust extension is almost ready. As Pauline said, we're going to be onboarding the first users in the next few days. That's something we've been working on under the radar a little bit, but that's something we truly like. We're using it now internally, and this is world changing, really, to be able to use your AI assistants with your data directly in the context of your tabs. That makes things a lot better to use because you don't have to copy paste anything. You don't have to switch between tabs. It's just right there, available all the time. So yeah, that we basically can replace, if you're, let's say you're in intercom and you're a customer agent in intercom and you have to answer a ticket and we don't have an intercom integration yet. So you can ask your agents to just install the Dust Chrome extension and just talk to their assistants directly with the context of the ticket. Just make sure if you have data policies in your company around, PII data and stuff like that, just make sure that your employees are trained around that, because whenever you share the data you're on, the tab you're on, you're going to ship it to Dust and you're going to ship it to the LLM. So yeah, just make sure of that. All right, that's pretty much it for today. That was the last thing I wanted to talk about. Make sure, if you're a builder and you want to understand Dust a little bit more and you're not on the Slack community yet, make sure you join the Slack community. We've got a lot of use cases and guides on the documentation, so don't hesitate to go to docs.dust.tt. We've got a lot more webinars coming. That's something we're going to be doing monthly. And we have some user testing sessions. If you want to join, we'll send the slides, and Remy is sending all the links to join us. Again, if you have any questions, now is the time to ask, because we have a few minutes left. We actually have a lot of minutes left, so I can hang around. We went pretty fast, so don't hesitate if you have any other questions. Again, join the Slack community. It's a pretty cool community to join. There's a lot of people that are showcasing their work, helping you build, showing what kind of stuff they've achieved in their own use cases. So yeah, don't hesitate to join, and thanks again for all the comments that I see in the chat. That's just still a small team, so that's why we're a bit under the radar when we're starting something as big as a Chrome extension, because we want to make sure we nail it. Yeah.
Alban, there is a question from Florian.
Florian, is there a public roadmap to see the cool features coming soon? Unfortunately not. We don't have a public roadmap, and it won't be super useful to publish one, actually, because again, we're a very small team, so our roadmap is changing a lot because we really, really adjust our strength to the market needs and our user needs. So we don't have, like, if you're expecting a 6 months roadmap, we don't have that. We have a vision, like we have a 6 months vision, but the roadmap is a lot shorter than that. because we're a very fast-paced team. I'm not seeing any other question. Where can we find the recording? Yeah, you'll receive everything by email. We'll also put the recording on the YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel with a bunch of videos if you want to see that. I'll put the link as well. Let me find it. There we go. Putting the link in the chat of the YouTube channel. The video is going to be there. You're going to receive it by email. You'll be able to find everything you need. What's the limitation in terms of context that Dust can take when querying tables? I'm not sure I understand the question about the context, but basically, how many? Well, if you plug it to Snowflake, none, because we're basically using the power Snowflake. If you're using our table queries with the joint data and stuff like that, it's more a matter of the number of rows than number of tables, fields, and joins, because we're spinning a short-lived database that has a limited memory. I don't have the numbers exactly in mind, but basically, if you go over a few, if you go over 100,000 lines, it's going to start being slow or break. But yeah, again, maybe it's in our documentation. You should take a look. But I don't have an exact answer to this. 50K rows. Thanks, Pauline. All right, I'm letting a few more minutes for questions. Some prompts that get a lot of time getting completed. Pricing the website of 1,000 companies. Same thing. I'm not sure to understand the question. What do you mean by background? Like you're in a conversation, so you need to wait for the message to come back. If you want to run that in the background, use our API and then do another like use Dust in another way than the conversation UI that we provide. And yeah, definitely in that time you'll be able to. But browsing the website of 1,000 companies, I'm not sure the assistant will go all the way through that. I think we have limitations on the number of websites you can browse at once. Yeah, you can build. There's a lot of stuff you can build on the API. What I showed today is mainly our UI, but most of our enterprise users are building a lot more stuff on our API than using directly the UI. They're building a bunch of automations, stuff that update their CRM, that take directly data and move that. So yeah, the API is really something you wanna look at. We don't have a plan to integrate Zoom calls right now, so I don't have an ETA for that. We will be looking at how to integrate them in the future, but I definitely don't have an answer for that, Lemuel. Sorry. Okay. I have a feeling this is pretty much done. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for listening. Thank you for Remy and Pauline to manage the questions in the chat. And we'll see you. We hope to see you around in the next builder session. And I'll be less sick, hopefully. Thank you very much, guys, and see you later.